Dr. Jenn is in the house.
Hello.
Dr. Jenn, how are you?
Good. I am so excited for our conversation.
Me too. Me too. And I know I said this before we started recording, but like that background though, so cool.
Yeah, and for anybody just listening to the audio, it looks like a spray painted brick background with like red and yellow and green and teal and blue. It's just a photography background, but on a white wall otherwise. But it looks like I did a badass painting job in my apartment. So it's a great backdrop. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like edgy and bright. Like it's
Yeah.
very, very you, Jenn.
Thank you.
So, Jenn, for folks who aren't sure who you are, do you
Yeah.
mind just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I live in San Diego now. I grew up in suburbs of Philadelphia. I was a good girl growing up, which means
Mm,
I quote unquote good girl, which means I followed, the rules of what it is to be a good girl,
mm,
which are, not so fun and very shame and fear laden.
yeah.
I got into sexual health education when I was an undergrad at Lehigh University and went on to get my PhD in sociology studying HIV prevention programs targeting adult women. And then got involved with the vagina monologues, which I know younger generations don't know what they are now, which is
I
heartbreaking.
do.
Yeah, yeah, that added like a 20, about a 20-year span of run, but now I talk to college students and they don't know about that play and it's not
Interesting.
being performed. I could see why, but anyway, it was great activism. Well, I could see why because the culture's changed some. It doesn't mean it's not still needed in a lot of ways. But anyway, so I
It,
got into acting and activism around women's sexual health and empowerment. Moved to San Diego 17 years ago and have since then been creating my own niche of my work of teaching workshops initially for women around spiritual sexuality.
mm,
And now I have a private practice where I work with individuals and couples as an intimacy coach. Um, Public speaking is my real passion. And prior to COVID, that was actually really working finally and traveling the country and speaking to various groups about couples intimacy, Valentine's events, a sex game show that I was doing, which was a blast.
so fun.
Also, sexual consent topics for college students. That's one of my specialty areas, especially through the lens of mindfulness and compassion. My first book was published about a year and a half ago called From Madness to Mindfulness Reinventing Sex for Women, and working on book number two.
Mhm.
Yeah, I play beach volleyball on this every Saturday. It's my favorite thing to do to play 2-on-2 beach volleyball here in San Diego. So, yeah, but my whole passion and commitment and purpose and dedication in life is creating paradigm shifts around healthy sexuality and effective communication
Yeah.
for folks. So, yeah.
Love it. Also Jen has her black belt, like just utter badass.
Yeah, my black belt in Subakdo, which is Korean karate. Yeah.
That is so cool.
Wait, do you want to
Um,
tell folks how we first met? Were you going
yes,
to? Okay.
exactly. So Jen and I first met when I was at Syracuse University. I started a campaign there called I Am Enough. Basically, the lowdown is I saw Brene Brown's TED Talk, like The Power of Vulnerability. It rocked my shit. And then I read her book, The Gifts of Imperfection. I cried my way through it, rocked my shit again. Like it was just like one of those gut punches. And I was like, holy shit, like I got to do something about this. It was the first time that I ever heard of perfectionism in a negative sense. I thought it was always like when you said, Jen, with like being the good girl, like following the
Hmm.
rules, like that resonates so hard. And I thought being a perfectionist was like the best thing possible, or like a way to like, if you were in a job interview with someone,
You
like you
mentioned that on a recent podcast. I heard you mention this.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, just like a
Yeah.
way to flip it as in like, "Oh, yeah,
Like,
I'm
oh,
just."
well, I'm a perfectionist, so here's my biggest flaw. But that
Yeah.
is because, or if you've ever dated a perfectionist, if you've ever worked with one, like they can be really judgmental of themselves and judgmental of others, and not be able to let go of things because it needs to be perfect. And perfect is a made up thing. Like, it doesn't exist.
It absolutely doesn't exist. So that was the first time that I was like discouraged of perfectionist ideas, and like the whole idea of being enough. It's just like a huge fucking exhale. So I started a campaign at school called I Am Enough. The second year that it happened, I got a budget and I got to bring a speaker. And that's where I brought Dr. Jenn in to talk about feeling enough in regards to the hookup culture. Because I was like, am I missing something?
Mm.
Like everyone's hooking up and like loving it. And I feel like I fucking hate it. Like, or if I like see someone on campus that I hooked up with, I would like my stomach fell out my butt. And I was like, this is the worst.
Yeah.
So that's when Jen came in and brought her sociology, like sexology, like whole perspective to it and just gave a lot of clarity.
Yeah, and for the record, statistically, majority of college students, actually many of them don't hook up much or rarely do. And then there's only a small percentage of those that hook up regularly. I can't remember if it was 15% or 25% who actually love it. Like love what they're getting out of it. But the majority of them don't. They're disappointed. They actually want deeper connection from it. They want
Mm.
emotional connection. Majority of females do not actually get the pleasure that they're looking for,
Yeah.
and they're faking it. So you are not alone. And that's part of what I talked about in that talk.
Exactly. And exactly. And
Yeah.
a lot of what you talked about, I remember was just like really digging into you, like using mindfulness to understand like what you're actually after, and like
Yes.
and not just doing it because you think you're supposed to do it, like really just like figuring out like what you want, which is really hard as a 20-year-old because you're like, I don't know what's happening. I'm drinking from
Yeah.
a fire hose. Like, but yeah,
Well, and that's part of the distinction I made too, which is actually kind of connects well with our topic here of like, how do you know what you want? How do you know what you authentically want? And part of the distinction I made, I know for your audience, it was that's still the biggest audience I've ever talked to. It was like
wow.
1,000 sorority women. It was
Hmm.
fantastic.
Yes.
Is that there's a difference between hooking up and hookup culture. And
Mm.
that a culture of something has social norms, has expectations, has obligations, has performance aspect of it because you think it's what you're supposed to do. And hooking up, though, like in the ideal, it's casual, it's fun, it could be lighthearted, it doesn't have to have a commitment, but you're like actually should be getting your needs met because you're
Yeah.
communicating about them. But hookup culture doesn't allow that type of communication. So
No.
making that distinction between the two and then figuring out what do you want for you? What feels good for you? What makes you feel connected? What makes you feel seen? What gives you pleasure? And can you, communicate and find others to be with sexually from that place? So,
Totally, totally. And like I loved like your emphasis on like really wholehearted thoughts, because there's so much stone cold like walls throwing up around the hookup culture, as in like I need to
mhm,
pretend that I don't care. Because if
right.
I pretend that I care, then I'm vulnerable, and like this is
Yeah,
not a vulnerable thing. It's just
I
like
know. And it's
so
insane, around. So if you think about sex is one thing, right? I think we can have a version of sex in our society that's rather detached. But if you think about it in terms of the word intimacy, which is
mm.
what you're doing, you are having physical intimacy, and then with that is emotional intimacy, mental intimacy, social intimacy, potentially spiritual, depending on what that means to you.
Mm.
Like that's us at our core. Intimacy is about authenticity and vulnerability and not putting walls up and honoring the person you are and having the courage to do that. And then actually being really compassionate and kind that this is another human being in front of you who has needs or wants that may be the same or different than yours. And how do you honor that and communicate through that? And so putting up walls around stuff like that in hookup culture, I mean, that is just rife for sexual consent issues and over drinking and
Yeah.
not getting the pleasure you want and just disconnection. So, yeah.
Oh man, folks, if you're younger slash in college, like heed this advice. Um, so I remember because when we met, geez Louise, was that like 4 years ago? Maybe 5 years
What?
ago?
Yeah, when were you a senior? When did you graduate?
20 Oh yeah, it was 2016. Yeah, so like 4 years ago. Um,
Yeah, 5 this year. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Whew, whew, baby. Um, you were still talking about like vulnerability and like authenticity, like a ton and incorporating that into your work. So, and now vulnerability and authenticity kind of seem like buzzwords at this point,
Mhm.
and like a lot of
Yeah.
people use them. So like
Yeah.
could you ground us and like define like what those are?
Yeah, and I well, so in general, authenticity, I mean, in general, like, think about just like big picture definitions of an authenticity generally means you're open and honest, and vulnerability means um you're open to attack, if you think that, and that's
Mm,
and that's kind of like the military or the masculine version of that word. Like that's why vulnerability is bad. You don't want to show vulnerability because it means quote unquote weakness.
mm,
And then you could be open to attack. And so however, like in the realm of relationships, in the realm of personal growth, in the realm of deep, satisfying, meaningful connections with yourself and with other human beings, what these words mean, at least how I use them, that vulnerability is raw. You have no armor up. You're not
yeah.
protecting yourself. So you're not, being reactive and lashing out or retreating in emotionally or just avoiding. You're staying present. And then authenticity, they go hand in hand for me. And then authenticity generally would show up as getting in touch with like what your thoughts are and how you're feeling and what you want or what you don't want, and then having the courage to communicate that in an effective way, in a responsible way. Yeah.
There's a lot of courage there, and that's kind of where, which we'll get into, is I'm seeing like a deficiency in, when we talk about like vulnerability and authenticity, like in the realm of like social media these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dig into that. But
Well, and there's
so
an interesting thing just because I've been thinking about this for another project that I'm hoping to work on. So I've been thinking
mhm.
about these topics since you and I had that phone call like 6 or 7 weeks ago, and we
Yeah,
dove into these topics. I've kind of been running with them since. So it's been
great,
great.
good.
But, the term authenticity is kind of based at this point on this idea that we have some core essence of who we are.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's true or not, right? Because from birth, we're being socialized immediately, into who we're supposed to be and what's expected of the gender that's been assigned to us. And so authenticity is supposed to be like getting down to some core, essence of yourself. And I don't, and maybe not everybody believes it that way. But I think that's how it's used sometimes, especially like in the spirituality community. I think it's like, oh, I've dropped into my spirit, my essence, which is a lovely thought. It's just a shame that so much of it seems bullshit when they do that. So, which is my interest in this topic, just to say like
Yeah,
why I'm sort of obsessed with this topic is because I live in San Diego and there's a lot of bullshit around these
yeah,
topics, you know,
yeah.
and I will, I can remember years ago walking into a room of like folks that were like tantra practitioners, which was
Mm.
lovely, and men and women. And I remember just interacting with these folks, and I'm like, what the fuck did I just walk into? I was like, there is nothing feels real. Everybody was using the right language, but none of it felt. And so, and I, at this point, I have 17 years of applied mindfulness practice, which is very much an embodied, noticing what I'm feeling inside of me and where I'm feeling it and what the emotions are. And so I can feel if someone else is blocked or if they're open.
Uh,
And so I can often, like, I have a felt sense that if somebody's saying the right words, but it's actually not coming from, I don't know, it's, I call it my superpower, but
yeah.
it feels like it's not coming from an authentic place inside of them. Now it's much easier in person than just reading somebody what they're writing on Instagram or whatever, but I could feel that. So that's why I kind of have a bit of an obsession with this topic, and then now how it shows up on social media, because there is so much of it. And then I see, I've seen female friends of mine get manipulated by that. They'll like date a guy and he's like this kind of spiritual guru or what. Like it's a lot in the spiritual guru world. You
Yes.
know, they say all the right things and whatever, but I was like, oh, I don't know. I think that guy's an asshole. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Do you this is like a side note, but do you
Yeah.
follow JP Sears at all?
Yes, I do.
He
Yes.
has he has some funny stuff. He has a
Oh,
video about like how to be a spiritual pickup artist, and that shit is real. Like and it's hilarious. Like he's just like, you're a goddess, and like uses shit like that.
so
Like,
however, JP Sears has become a QAnon conspiracy theorist this year.
I know, I
Yeah.
know,
So
I
I do
know.
not want to promote his work or what he's doing. He is like, he's gone off the deep end. Like because I remember in the spring being like, oh, these videos feel different. I was like, oh, he's kind of an asshole now. Like, what is he doing and saying? And I couldn't make sense of it. Yeah, no, he's hardcore.
He
Yeah,
took a
conspiracy
he
theorist.
took a hard left.
Yeah, he did, which a
Yeah.
lot of people in the spirituality community did. There's a whole thing called conspirituality now. That's conspiracy theorist and spirituality. It's a fantastic podcast. Call that.
Oh,
And there's been a huge merging of even big names in the field, like Christiane Northrup, which I don't know if you know her, but like she
no.
wrote this women's wisdom book probably like 20 years ago or something. It was fantastic. Like I used it as a textbook in college classrooms for women in health classes. Like she was cutting edge of bringing mind, body, spirit into women's health as a medical doctor. Yeah, she's totally a conspiracy theorist now after
Oh,
this year too. Yeah, it's insane. But this again ties very much to this topic we're talking about because they're sharing their vulnerable stories. They're being very authentic about what they feel is the truth inside of them. But
mm.
they are way off target because like you don't
Get
know
him,
what's
Jen.
authentic for you if you're not digging through your shit. What's authentic to you is going to be based on your patterns and your fears and your childhood issues that you have, and you're going to keep repeating that stuff if you don't get to the core of that. And it's dangerous in the spirituality realm because then sell their services, and they're supposed to
Mm.
be inspiring other people. That's so funny. I didn't expect it to go down this path. Our conversation, like you sent me questions and I was like,
Yeah.
these are great. But as you see, I think about these things a lot.
Yeah,
They're very
totally,
interesting
totally.
to me. Go ahead,
So
get us
so
back on track.
yeah, back on the rails. So where like tell me about the evolution of like vulnerability and authenticity in mainstream culture. Like when do you think that kind of like happened, and how would you
Yeah.
describe where we are now?
I did a little digging around because I was like, I'm not sure how. So this is my best guess is that in the 60s, the human potential movement, I don't know if you've heard of that.
No.
Esalen, which is like a retreat place up in Northern California, um, started in the early 60s around that, kind of the start of the New Age movement. There's a lot of overlap there. And that's my thought because that really is what we've seen now for the past 40, 60 years of this that there's so many people, especially in a place like San Diego, there's going to be a lot of people who will identify as spiritual but not religious.
Mm,
So
mm,
they may believe in a higher power. They might have been raised in a more traditional religion, but now they're spiritual of sorts. My guess is that's the influence of the human potential movement and the new age movement, that this now is its own movement. It's also tied to the wellness community,
yeah.
and so there's a lot of money to be made in it. um and then I would say much more like mainstream is like Brene Brown's first
Yeah.
TED Talk came out 10 years ago. And she brought vulnerability and shame and authenticity to a mainstream audience, but grounded in research because she's a
Yeah.
PhD and she's a social worker and a researcher. Um, and so, we had something to hang our hats on more. And so because now it's, vulnerability and like authenticity, it's like part of good leadership skills, especially in a place like maybe Silicon Valley or with like leaders that are millennials. People want their companies, they want them to be transparent, they want them to be authentic, they want to know where their money is really going and what they care about. So it's infiltrated even folks that in general in the United States that I would say are not part of these movements at all, say for example Trump supporters, but the reason they like one of the reasons they like Trump so much is because he was so authentic, because he was
Mm,
so real. He
mm,
just said how he felt. He didn't perform in any way.
mm.
So I do think there's mainstream values in that when you think somebody's authentic, it makes you trust them. And that's it. So we like people, we want to buy from people, we want to be around people that we trust because as humans, as social animals, if you trust somebody, then you should be safe physically, emotionally. You should be safer. So, I think it's probably something we look for as humans, but now it's become quite commodified.
Yeah.
And that's the piece I really look at, like JP Sears you mentioned.
Mhm,
Look at what people are saying and then look at what they're peddling and
mhm.
what they're making money off of. And those things are so tied
Yeah.
today. So
Huh.
one other thing about this that I think is interesting, and this connects to the social media topic. I went to Burning Man for the first time a couple years ago. It was fantastic experience. And I expected there was gonna be lots of naked people.
Yeah.
That's what I thought burning I mean, it was 70,000 people, but I thought there'd be lots of naked people. And I remember, like, and every day I would take a shower because we had, like, an outdoor shower, like, we could rig up our own thing, like, just water, and just, use my Dr. Bronner soap. And then I would walk naked back across my camp because it just felt lovely and it was so warm out. But, like, almost nobody did that. And
Huh.
then it was funny because then people would be like, "Hey, Dr. Jen." They're, like, just sitting out in front of their campers or something. I was like, "Just finished my shower. Feels good. Looking good, Dr. Jen." It just felt amazing. So I was shocked. I was like, oh, when you walk around, there's hardly any naked people. There's this one naked guy I remember because he stood out as a naked guy. He was just walking around naked with his boots on, walking down the street the one day. But there was so little of that. And so I talked to a friend who went in like the early 2000s, and she said there was lots of naked people. Men
Hmm.
were naked, women were naked, nudity was a main big part of it. So what I saw when I was there in 2018 was not nudity, but like I'll say performance nudity, in that it
Hmm.
was scantily clad, like little clothing, but all in really fashionable ways, men
Oh,
and women,
okay. Like an
because
Instagrammable.
exactly
Okay.
what it was.
Okay.
And so the difference of the early 2000s is two things: one, we didn't have social media, and two, we did not have phones with cameras on them.
Wow.
So it was really an escape that people went to. There was I mean, the internet was still relatively new anyway, but there was clearly like nobody's taking pictures, nobody's doing stuff. Like, they might take some pictures, but um it's just and they weren't going to be posting them anywhere. There wasn't a performance aspect. And so like that's disappointing to me. That there was something that was more authentic and vulnerable, of
Yeah.
being naked like that if you're not used to doing that in public, but like it's okay. And that we've lost that now. So people won't do that because they want to perform.
Yeah.
They
They
want
want to
they
be able
want
to
their body.
post.
I mean, and I get like there is fun putting costumes and everything together, but like that's a whole consumer industry now also of
Yeah.
the Burning Man clothing. But I think that's a really different, like we think as a society we get more open and more sexually open and more open with our bodies and more accepting. We don't at all. I think we've gone backwards, frankly.
Interesting. I could see that happening too with like Fitspo, and all these like body things. That and also like the inherent comparison and anxiety that comes from consuming a lot of social media
Yep.
and feeling like you're not enough because you're looking at other people's highlight
Right.
reels and then feeling
Right.
inadequate and stuff like that. That makes sense to me. um so on Instagram I'm seeing a lot of vulnerability and authenticity stories. Where I'm seeing it, I follow a lot of fitness stuff. I'm seeing a
Hmm.
lot of cellulite. Um, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not being like, how
No,
dare you sell.
it's so funny for me because it's still like, right, cellulite is one of the most embarrassing, hideous things. You could be in great shape and you still have cellulite and people hide it, That's why I mean, if you've ever done a yoga class where you're not wearing long tights, but you're wearing like shorts and you look down and see yourself at various angles, you're like, oh, son of a bitch. Like this is because I do that sometimes. And then
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
and I'm
totally.
like almost 48 now. And then I was like, oh, right. This is why they all wear those tights down to their ankles or mid calves. Cause like, Jesus Christ, the way our legs look at these angles.
Right.
But go ahead because
Yeah,
this is amazing to me in a positive way that
right.
like people are putting pictures of cellulite, just quote unquote owning it.
I am absolutely loving it. That like it's normalizing cellulite, even like people who like I have followed and I'm just like, wow, they have like 0% body fat or something like that. And I'm like, oh damn. Oh, okay, cool. You have a flaw. That's really awesome. Um,
You
quote
have a
unquote flaw.
flaw,
You know,
right?
um, but like something that it's feeling a little bit performative to me. And
Mhm.
the reason why it's feeling fake slash contrived slash performative is that everyone is doing it in the exact same way. And
Mm.
it's getting amazing feedback, obviously. Like I know for certain that like if I were to post a picture of cellulite, like it would just obviously go over very well, which is making me like, because like I just
It's
know
so funny. That's
just given how
insane.
everyone's responding. So like to me, what's making me think, and I would love to hear your point of view, is like one, and I also honestly want to know whether or not you think this is generally good or helpful or
Yeah.
but to me it's like vulnerability is kind of like opening yourself up, obviously, but like without the safety net of knowing how it's gonna go. And to
Mm.
me, it feels like
Good.
people know how it's gonna go, so they
Mhm.
do it, and it's all carbon copies of how everyone else is doing it.
Yeah.
And so it's not truly you. Like there are certain people on Instagram where I'm like, "Ooh, you have like a different flavor of how you're talking about body positivity." And I
Mm.
love it. Like if I can tell that this is you. But then there are other
Mm.
ones that I'm like, hold on. Like, are you just doing this because you saw someone else get thousands of likes for showing cellulite? Like, tell me your thoughts.
Oh my god, I just keep laughing because it's so funny. Just like it's I love that cellulite is being normalized. If it
Mm,
really works in that way overall of women knowing you could be in great shape and you still have cellulite and it's just part of a woman's body and Jesus, why do we have to make such a big deal about it and feel so much shame around it?
yep.
Like if it is doing anything to chip away at that, that is fantastic.
Mm,
On the flip side, and this is what I think is super interesting. So I've broken it down to 3 categories,
yeah.
of what I think in terms of vulnerable, authentic posts, like on social media. And I think the first category is what I call like, that it's coming from strength. It
Mm,
is a post that is raw. It's maybe painful for you. You've really reflected on this.
yes.
It's scary to share. So that exactly speaks
Yes.
to what you were saying. Like this
Mm,
is I was sexually assaulted 20 years ago and I've actually never shared this with anyone, but I've been working on it with a therapist and this is part of my journey to get it out there and own it and get over my shame for it. Like that type of thing.
yeah.
Um the second category I would say is what I call like reactive, self-righteous, self-indulgent. You could be really authentic and vulnerable, but like you got your head up your own ass. You're pissed about something and you feel like you have the right to go off on it. And so I think there's a time and place for this, but I don't think for me, the version of authenticity and vulnerability that to me is part of kind of personal growth is that it's very mindful.
Mm,
You're not just going off on something. You've actually sit and you've worked on it and you've reflected on it versus just being this pisses me off so much or you're vindictive. Some of that
mm,
like there's a vindictive, I was going to say anger energy, but anger has a time and place, but again it could be very reactive because it makes you feel powerful in the moment. to share your stuff. So I say because there's a lot more of this stuff that we could see the version of it of authenticity as liberation from gender or sexual or racial shackles of society type of thing, which is great.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think it's particularly reflective. In the long run, I don't actually think it's compassionate to self or compassionate to others in terms of um, like making a difference
So
as a social media post.
where are you seeing that most?
I see it in like social justice world.
Okay.
So
That's
that's a lot of stuff in my world. I would never comment on it that
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yeah. No.
Um, but yeah, and often what folks get is they will get a lot of like, yes, amen, sister. Yes, you stand up for this, you do this, right? They'll get tons of, like you said, it's almost predictable the type of support they get. But the thing
Exactly.
is, they also could totally be attacked by other people because anytime you're, you know, self-righteous and black and white in your presentation of something, I think you're going to get pushback from assholes
Yeah.
or from trolls. So and I'm not saying you deserve it, but just anyway, so I think that's put because that's part of my world a lot of what I see. That's why I put that in because I feel like it's viewed as vulnerable and authentic and really courageous. But I think it's in that authenticity and vulnerability to me are studying your patterns and your
Yeah.
automatic reactions and choosing to work through them and do something that's healthier and different.
Yeah.
It's not in that category.
And like talking about the safety net, like there are certain opinions that you can go off and be as mean as you want on the internet, and that is considered blanket statement okay nowadays. Um,
Yeah. No, I
and
mean,
that
not in my I won't I personally won't do that because I cultivate my stuff really well, but I've had years of working on mindfulness and compassion and being like, these are not the messages I want to be putting out there.
oh, yeah, yeah, that's a really tricky one.
Ugh.
So
So the third
yeah, third.
category then is what you were saying before that it feels calculated, it feels
Mm,
performative. And this
mm,
to me is not that there I could see there being overlap in all three of these categories maybe in
yeah.
one post. But to me this is somebody who maybe like somebody in the wellness world who is sharing their difficult, hard story or whatever, but like, what are they selling you? Like they're selling something also. So the thing
Mm,
is you can do that in a really authentic way, but you need to be doing your personal work and knowing, is this am I authentically sharing this or is my goal to try to manipulate the emotions of the person reading this because I'm marketing something and I have something to sell. And I'm
mm.
selling my authenticity. I'm selling my struggles and my stories.
Yeah, those
Um,
skinny tea posts, like,
Oh, I don't know. What are those?
oh, that's just something. I think it was like like high level celebrities like Kim Kardashian, like
Oh.
freaking Gwyneth Paltrow, like selling crazy shit on the internet. But basically just being like, I struggled with XYZ my whole life, and then I drink the skinny tea and now I don't struggle with it type of narrative. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very,
Yuck,
very
right?
calculated. So I the cellulite one feels to me like performative vulnerability.
In some
Because
cases.
the funny thing is even yeah, I feel like sometimes when a woman's like, "I have a big belly and I shouldn't," and there's this one woman I know that I've seen some of her stuff. She's local, and like I met her in person, and she's adorable. And then I see her posts online. I was like, "Oh, I think she like literally leans at an angle to make her belly look bigger," and it's
Oh,
like, "Oh, this is so mind fuck to me."
yeah.
I was like, "Oh, so I don't know what to do." And then everyone's like, "You're so beautiful, girl. You just own your body."
Yeah.
And so it's and the fact is, it's like some of her posts, she's actually has really great things to say. She's a good writer. She's a good, she does reflect well and she can kind of deconstruct some difficult things well. But then the accompanying with the photos, like just the
Mm.
photos and like the heavy makeup and the hair that's perfectly done and like the outfits and all, like there is so much performance authenticity, but like but because like she's curvier, well, and big breasts, so the cleavage is always front and center. So I
Mm.
don't know. There's so much to deconstruct there. I
Yeah.
can't fully make sense of it, but it keeps me obsessed with this topic.
Yeah. I mean, something else I was thinking about, like with people being like calculated slash like carbon copies of each other, that it's very possible that like people have seen other people post things that have made them be like, oh, like I can do that too. And so
Yeah.
they end up doing something similar and it doesn't come from like a
Yeah.
negative space. I
Yep. It
also
comes from
think
genuine courage and
yes,
fear and pride of them. Be like, I don't want to carry this shame anymore. I'm gonna put
yes.
myself out there. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so possible to be doing like a carbon copy of someone else and have it be really hard for you. Like, it's very possible. I want to share like a vulnerability Instagram story just to like kind of ground the difference between like being vulnerable versus
Yeah.
just like posting something. So
Yeah.
I danced as a kid, but like didn't really do like too much like after the age of 12. I started learning dance routines on the internet. And I at one point in time, I think it was like 3 years ago, I filmed myself doing one of the dance routines that I learned. And I was like, I think I'm gonna post this on Instagram. And my heart's even like racing, even thinking about like how I felt
Oh,
in that moment. Cause I was like,
yeah.
I was sweating. I was like so nervous. And I was like, and I know this is so ridiculous, like, but like this is just how it was. Um, and I was just like, I don't know whether people are gonna comment like you suck, like, or this is bad, or like nobody comments or likes it at all. And then
Right.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh fuck. Like, so I remember I like finally posted it and I was just like pacing in the room that I was in, and I had to turn off my phone and go for a drive for like 3 hours because it was
Oh,
just like, or not 3 hours, but like for
yeah.
like 20 minutes because I was just like, holy fuck. I was so nervous.
Because
And
you
then
could feel shamed by others for that, for
exactly
just
like,
you authentically being you and doing something you love and something new that you're learning and putting it out there. Yes, that is
whew,
authenticity and vulnerability.
whew. Turns
Yeah.
out that people like my dance videos. So like now if I do it,
I
it
I've seen a lot of them. I
yeah,
was like, look at her letting loose.
I know.
It's so fun. Like you were just going to town. Like you look at you are so much fun. It's
it, it
awesome.
it is so fun. But like now when I post them, I don't really consider that to be super vulnerable
Right, right.
because I know the response. Even though it's still sharing a part of myself, it's not that digging deep, going through
Yeah,
the bullshit like shame, like hangover type of effect.
yeah.
And that like Ben, my boyfriend, calls it like bushwhacking, like because you're doing something new. Like,
Yes.
and
Right, that's what I call it too.
oh,
Huh.
cool. Look at that.
Yeah, because it's like you're in a dense forest and you're doing something new.
Yeah.
You're creating new neural pathways and it's really hard. And you'd rather be on this paved path of what's easy. Yeah, nice.
Yeah. And so to me, that is something that I am um thinking that there may be a lack of, is a lack of bushwhacking. Just a
Mhm.
lot of like someone obviously what like led the charge. And then
Yeah,
people are kind of following into that paved path of like,
yeah,
well, this is an okay lane for me to talk about. But there are so many lanes of life to talk about
yeah.
that are not
Right.
showing up.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because I think people think they know what vulnerability is, or they think they know what authenticity is.
Mm,
I've seen this, because mindfulness now has been a buzzword for a while.
mm,
And there was a group that was hiring me for something, and I had a phone call with them a few months ago. And I was like, my book's all about mindful intimacy. And she was like, yeah, she goes, yeah, I wouldn't really do anything on mindfulness. We've done a lot around that. I think, we're good with that. And I was like, I am willing to bet you have not done this.
yeah.
One in your intimate life, but like it's not just like, oh, let me work on being present when my partner's right in front of me or something. Like there's so much more, right? It's so much unpacking of socialized shame and vulnerability and fear and an aging body that's looking different, or
Mm,
you've had babies and your breasts are sagging and your vagina is different, or you're having some like all of that, constantly being in that space of
yeah.
vulnerability and shame and fear of judgment and aging bodies, and like communicating from that place and unpacking all the stuff you
Ah,
learned growing up and how that's showing, like, that's mindful intimacy. And I was
yeah.
like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure you haven't done that, because nobody lives that, like, that applied mindfulness of catching yourself every day, of being like, oh, what am I feeling inside? Like, I just got hooked by what that person said and I want to snap back. How do I not do that? And like, what's going on for me? Where do I feel that inside? What emotion is that? What's the story I'm telling myself? What's a different choice I could make? So
Yeah.
I feel like people don't really get mindfulness. Compassion. Compassion is like sitting with suffering. Like, it's sitting with the discomfort and doing that for someone else and being present with it and not having to fix it, but
Yeah.
actually moving towards that pain and then shifting it towards something positive. So I think these concepts are used a lot. I don't see many people like living it in that way. And that's like, that's the
Mm,
type of thing I could feel in people, especially like when my clients are in front of me. It's easiest because like they're there and they're working on this stuff. But even so, I could kind of pick it up in other people. Um, like, are they living this in this felt sense way, or are
yeah.
they performing it? So
Yeah. So like looking at like the different types of vulnerability, like I'm even curious, like how could someone tell if they're like, I mean, there might be someone listening right now that's like, holy shit, I'm doing that. Like, holy shit, I'm just like,
yeah,
I'm not being myself on the internet. I'm just doing what is trendy at the moment. Like,
yeah,
what can we do? Like, how do we start
yeah.
to overcome that?
It's a gr and, I'm thankful you sent me some of your questions ahead of time, because
Yeah.
had you just asked us on the spot, I'd be like, "Oh, shit, I don't know." So, but I got to think about today, which I really like, and it's already kind of what I've been talking about, and it's at the core, like, I know you read my book, and,
Yeah.
on, like, page 80, I have this picture of a
Uh-huh.
triangle where you look at your thoughts, your interpretations, your emotions, your bodily sensations, and so for me, finding out, like, if you're doing this or not and what your motivation is like, it's a practice in mindfulness that you pause and say, what's my motivation and my intention behind posting this?
Mm,
One question would be, if nobody liked this, how would I feel? If
mm,
1,000 people liked this, how would I feel? So
mm.
that's one way to look. What am I most hoping for? What am I most afraid of? Um, you know, Oh, and then checking into, like, how am I really feeling it? Like, am I actually feeling into this? Or am I just living in my head and performing and doing something that I think I should be doing? Um, hold on, I wrote one other thing down. What's the story you're telling yourself? Okay, I kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, for example, have you ever seen those ones, like, hopefully you haven't, but they're so annoying. Like, on Facebook over the years, somebody will post like, I just wanted to see if anybody really reads my posts until the end. And so if you're, reading this, then just share 2 words about, the first time we met, and then don't explain it anymore. Like, have you seen stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm cringing.
I
Yeah.
I will literally, it could be somebody really close to me. Gratefully, most close people to me don't do that. I will literally never like that or on those ones. I was like, I can't, like, that to me is probably the second category, like, that's self-indulgent,
Mm,
vulnerability. It's also, they're cutting and pasting something somewhere else. It's not like they created it themselves. So it's, I guess they have some neediness or something, or some insecurity, and then they cut and paste something and post it, and then it feels manipulative.
yeah.
Because then you're like, oh, if you like that person, and then you think they're feeling bad about themselves, then you feel, it's like manipulation. So I'm
Mm,
like, I do not, I do not, I will not be the friend that is at your side if you're doing shit like that.
yeah, like Yeah, I have a very similar reaction. Like I've seen the like posts like, let's see who really cares.
I know.
Or comment or something like that. And I was like, ooh, I'm not
You're
even
like
touching that.
you're
I'm
like,
not even
"Not me,
touching
I
that.
guess. Not me."
You're like, I love you, but I'm
Like,
no, I'm not going there.
not doing it.
That's my boundary. Um, okay, one more thing on Instagram
Yeah,
vulnerability is like to me, I think that you can kind of sense who's full of shit and who isn't. And perhaps it's up to each individual person to decipher who's full of shit and who isn't.
yeah,
And maybe your opinions are different than my opinions, and that's
yeah,
a-okay. But are there any um ways to decipher what's real on
yeah.
Instagram?
Well, I have 2 thoughts on it. One is, the more you know yourself, which means the more you know what motivates you, what your fears are, what your insecurities are, what your patterns and triggers are, the more that you're in touch with that and you're on your own personal growth journey, and whether that's with a therapist or a counselor or reading Brene Brown books and journaling on them or sitting with your girlfriends or starting a podcast like this,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, all of those things are different aspects of personal growth journeys of realizing, hey, I've got blocks, I've got hangups, I've got baggage from childhood and my parents or body or just societal learnings. Are you in the process of unpacking that?
Mm.
To me, through mindfulness, because whatever path you're taking, it involves looking, slowing you down, and looking at yourself and knowing yourself. The more you do that, the more you could just and it does it actually develops the prefrontal cortex of our brain, like the executive functioning more. So
Mm.
it gives you, the more self-awareness you have, the more emotional regulation you have, the more intuition you have, the more your ability, your emotional intelligence, your social intelligence, your ability to like read others. So
Yeah.
all of those are connected. So developing self-awareness, mindfulness skills in that way of studying it. Mindfulness isn't just like concentrating
Yeah.
hard on something. It's being aware of and present with anything that's showing up, your thoughts, your icky emotions, the icky feelings in your body, in your chest, in your belly, and like studying them and being kind to yourself. That compassionate piece. So the
Yeah.
more you do that, the more you are like an antenna to attune to other people. The second piece is like, to me, this is some media literacy skills, which unfortunately we're
Oh.
generally not taught. But how do you look at something, especially so if somebody's selling something, right? If they're a fitness person or if they're a wellness person, or even if they have, classes or something they're selling, um, what you know, what are they selling? How are they trying to make you feel? How do you feel viewing it? Do you like yourself more? Do you like yourself less? Do you like them more? Do you like themself less? Like, I would pull that across those questions. Are they trying to convince you of something, to believe in
Mm.
something? Um, and maybe it's to believe in yourself, but then they're still selling you something. So I you can, I think, like, because I work on this for myself, because I work for myself. Like, I got to try to sell stuff and sell classes and stuff like that. And I believe in the value of what I have to offer. Over many years, I had to get used to learning how to sell myself and not feeling like I was, being inappropriate or it was wrong or something, which is particularly hard for women often. But I was
Very
like,
hard. Yeah.
know I've helped so many people's lives over the years, and I know my approaches are unique. They're not for everybody. But um, yeah, but the thing is, I also, most of my social media stuff is just me being goofy in life and doing my thing. And then occasionally I was like, "Oh yeah, I have this new course. Go." Check it out. And then basically I don't make many sales. So because I'm not good at that. And it's not like I do, though, I totally believe in the value of my stuff. So if I'm sharing, a story about something, but normally I'll just be upfront, like, this is a sales post and you can tell the difference in it.
Yeah, totally.
Versus I'm not trying to, share some vulnerable thing and how this process saved me or something like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So my answer to that is mindfulness and media literacy, which you could actually, Google media literacy questions to ask. I teach this occasionally, like, to teen girls,
Yeah.
of how to deconstruct media messages, because they impact the shit out of us, and it's much more
100%.
empowering to be able to reflect on it.
Yeah. Um, something that you said that I really loved and it really resonated with me is like the more you are mindful, the more and you work on your stuff and you work on your shit, the more you're able to like this is how I'm interpreting it, like, but like see yourself and others. I have noticed that the more that I've like worked through my garbage and like the more I'm able to like define and understand it, the more I'm able to see other people's I can name other people's like suffering, if that makes sense. Like just be like, I'm able to see like, holy shit, I've been there and
Mm,
I know what that is. Or
yeah.
you know, just in any certain situation, like, um, yeah, for example, like Ben and I were watching like this silly show, and there was this woman who was like acting like she was like the crazy one, but then she found a different relationship and then was not all of a sudden all as crazy. And I was
Yeah.
just like, I just thought, and I was just like, you know, like I've been in relationships myself where I have not been myself. I've been like nastier. And it's because it was like an environment slash like situation I was in. So it was like the more that I would like worked through that, I was able
Yeah.
to identify it in her. And I was just like, I actually don't think you're crazy. I just think you were in a shit situation. And like, I totally think that's possible.
Yeah. No, I do think there's certain people that are more likely to bring out the crazy in us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but that's, our journey to be like, "Well, how did I end up back with this type of person? Or how did I end up back in a situation like this that I know doesn't work for me or that doesn't bring out the best in me?" And not that there's not always personal growth opportunities in everything that's difficult. But there's some people in some situations that are just never going to be healthy and never good for us and that drag
Yeah.
us down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love the, like, being kind of like being the change you want to see, like, the more that we work on ourselves, the more we'll be able to identify in others,
Oh yeah.
and, like, the better the thing will be. So I think that is such a beautiful takeaway for, like, kind of like how to navigate social media, and completely love the emphasis on media literacy. That is near and
Mhm.
dear to my heart.
Awesome.
Jen, do you think that there is a next step slash future of vulnerability and authenticity? Or I know that's such a weird question, but do you have
No, it's
like a
interesting.
feeling about like what the future may be? Or do you have a feeling that there's gonna be a whole other wave of something else?
Well, so a couple of places my head goes. One is I remember this was a couple years ago. I have a family that I'm really good friends with, and their kids are teenagers. One just went off to college, actually. And a few years ago, she was talking about how some of her friends had two Instagram pages. They had one
Mm.
that was for public, and like because their parents then followed them because their parents wanted to see what was going on. And then they had a separate one, like a hidden one, private, that then just for their close friends.
Is that like Finsta?
Yes, and I think right, and well, the difference being they wanted a place where they didn't feel like they had to perform. At least this was how she
Oh.
presented it. That
Oh,
she
okay.
actually, yeah. So the opposite, like the other one was the cultivated one, and the one that was probably PG for their parents to follow. Um, But the other one was, at least this is how she said, but I literally have not heard this anywhere else since. So I don't know
Okay.
how much this is a thing. But she said some of her friends wanted a place where they didn't feel like they had to perform. They didn't have to look perfect. The angles didn't have to be perfect, but they could still connect with their friends.
Huh.
So I that would be fascinating to me. If that was, I mean, in a way that would be nice because at least people would be conscientious that they're making a
Yeah.
choice. The other thing is, in general, like, what's the future for it? I think this takes hard work, right? All the stuff I'm talking about,
Yeah.
mindfulness, compassion, vulnerability, authenticity, like at the real depth of level. And this is like a lifetime journey of pulling back the layers and being present and because again, particularly because we're in ever changing bodies and we're
Yeah.
always in ever changing relationships, it means we're always challenged in new ways.
Mhm.
And it's hard. And so the mindfulness needed, the slowing down and reflecting needed is so antithetical to our current technology world.
Oof.
I don't see, I see all of these things getting worse.
Oof.
Although I do, the fact that it's like considered part of leadership, that's some, being a really good leader is somebody who is compassionate, who is more authentic and vulnerable, and learning distinctions between that in the workplace, because not everything's appropriate. Like, I don't know, maybe the fact that it's branching into other areas, I think, is positive, and people realize, like, especially like a leader, a CEO of a company who's trying to lead in this way, if they are doing it in any way that's calculated or performance or feels inauthentic, their people will know, and they'll people
Yeah.
will call bullshit, and they won't trust their leader. So, yeah, so I don't, yeah, is there another, you also asked, is there another area of self-work that I think will become mainstream? Well, that's an interesting thought. Um, I don't know. It'd be nice if everybody just started like going to nude beaches and just nudity was okay, because then there's no hiding stuff. There's no
Yeah.
angles. We're all in the bodies we've got that are all perfectly imperfect. No, I don't think we're headed there, but that would make me happy.
That would make you happy. That's what we need. Um, one thing that you brought up with like the fake Instagram accounts, the way that I have seen Finstas, quote
Yeah.
unquote Finstas, is just like a place to be like hilarious. So I know like some people who will make fake Instagrams and it's all just like horrible pictures of themselves. And it's like, and it's like the
Oh.
anti-Instagram. It's just
Yeah.
like like shit that it is. I have a couple of friends that have like Finstagram accounts and they are so goddamn funny.
That's funny.
And yeah, so that is how I have like interpreted it. It's just like
Ah.
if I made a fake Instagram account, it would be like there would not be a single picture on there where I didn't have a double or triple chin. Like that would be like the barrier.
I had about, it was probably about a year or two ago, a friend of mine who's an older gentleman, he actually commented one of the times on the phone, he goes, "I notice you're posting more photos of, like, just you, not, like, glammed up for a photo or something perfect." And I was like, "Yeah." I go, "Yeah, I'm doing it on purpose." Frankly, those type of things will often get less
Yeah.
less likes. I
Yeah.
go, because I don't want to be held to some standard. I don't wanna pretend I'm that. I don't wanna model that for other people. Like, I am a full range of things that I am. So, there are certain times, like, there was probably about a year or 2 ago, I was at a, really, it was in Prague, which was lovely.
Ooh.
And it was at an international sexual health conference. And I gave a talk, and I had asked somebody in the audience, a friend, to take a bunch of photos of me. And like, public speaking photos are the worst, especially because I am so expressive with my
Yeah,
mouth and my
yeah,
eyebrows. And, I'm very animated and I speak. And like, maybe one, actually, I'm not sure any of them were good and usable, so I ended up, like, staging a photo, pretending I was talking to the audience as he took it, so at
yeah,
least I had one that I could use for professional purposes, and then I took 4 of them and made, like, a collage of, like, just the most ridiculous
yeah.
facial expressions, and posted on Facebook and on Instagram and all, and I was like, "Oh my god," I go, "Is this what I look like when I speak?" But I I know it's ridiculous, right? It's meant to be ridiculous. I also know, like, that's my face when I speak. Like, I
Yeah.
look like that. That's me. I like my animation. I like the energy that I bring to things. And I was like, it's a little jarring when you see what it looks like in still shots, but like that to me is like, this is me. Like, and I could laugh at me, like, and it's okay, and I could share that with others, and we can laugh at it. So that's
Yeah.
kind of where I have ended up at this point.
Yeah.
Um, with posts and stuff like that. So
Yeah, as you were speaking, I wrote down embrace your face and I truly believe that. Like and I even did that like even in like college and stuff. I was just like I need to like not wear makeup like at least half the time I need to go makeup free because like I in my mind I was like I don't want to not wear I don't want to feel like I need to wear makeup every day and I don't want to like not wear makeup one day and people be like, "Oh, are you sick?" Cuz that's
right.
just like the
I know.
worst. You
Yeah.
know? So it's like So a lot of it is just like, embracing your face, be like, this is what my face looks like. This is, and
Yeah.
like for you, this is what my face looks like when I am talking. This is what happens.
Yeah.
Something that I thought about too with like for the future of vulnerability, I would love to see this work trickle down to um
Mhm.
younger generations. And
Yeah.
because I am seeing people in like high school slash like freshmen in college, and like it is it is really kind of hard to see like the sexualization that's going on of
Oh,
like
I
that,
know.
like self-imposed pretty much because they're
Yep.
posting it. And I just,
But learned through society that this is
yeah,
what gets you value and attention. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I would love to see like high school courses on this stuff. I would
Oh
love
my
to
god,
see
yes.
like Brene Brown as a part of like a high school reading class. Like instead of you like having to extracurricularly find it, like I think it would
Yeah.
be, that is kind of what I hope.
Well, and
Um,
it's interesting because right, teen girls in that way may learn that that is um a path to power, of feeling
mm,
powerful, of feeling valuable and getting attention. Um but realizing that that's power based on the whim of others and the whim of
yeah,
society and your body and looks at the age that you're at also,
yeah,
which means it's not in your control versus
mm,
what is it to find a depth of acceptance for yourself. Oh, that's so funny. I could even feel this saying it. I
yeah,
feel this like in
yeah,
my solar plexus, this like
yeah,
depth of acceptance of yourself and who you are and all your beauty and messiness as a human. um that's true strength, that's true vulnerability and authenticity, and that's where our true strength comes from, of living and speaking from that place.
mm,
Because that power can't be taken away from us, right? That's
yeah,
kind of like a Nelson Mandela thing, like, they're put him in a cage, but like he can keep the freedom in his mind.
mm,
And that's, I mean, it's kind of a weird example, but
yeah.
to me, it's the same type of thing of realizing even if others are constricting you, like what do you have power and control of inside you at a true depth of strength and courage?
Yeah. And another idea that I'm thinking of with this is the difference between, I just listened to a Brene Brown podcast, so this is like super top
Nice.
of mind, but the idea of mastery, and the idea of mastery being like a lifetime journey.
Mm,
And it's like the almost. Like so
yeah.
it's not like success, like frankly, like vulnerability, self-acceptance, working through your shit is not a destination.
No.
You're never going to get there. And like that's like kind of depressing, I guess, to think about, but it's also like but it's
Yeah,
also
but it's a beautiful reality of being a
yeah,
human. And the thing is, the longer you're on the journey, the more you can enjoy the journey, the more you can
right.
laugh at yourself, the you see the power of the depth that you can really connect with other people from these places. Like the it's so worth it, not because you get 1,000 comments on Instagram, but it's so worth it because I mean, frankly, and this is how I wanted to kind of one of the things I wanted to wrap up with
Yeah.
is, you know, my you were asking like my life's work,
Yeah.
and the purpose of it, and something I've started bringing in recently, that's particularly when I'm working with older audiences that are over 50. I'm not just talking about in my work of like how to be more romantic with your partner, or how to
Mm,
talk through difficult problems, or how to have more sex. Like, I'm literally talking about the type of stuff that people regret on their deathbed.
oof.
Like, what people regret, they don't. There's a book called Five Regrets of the Dying. It's from a hospice nurse, a while back, Bronnie
Wow.
Ware, I think is her name, in Australia. And she was working with these people and she ended up writing a blog and writing a book. And what do people most regret? Right. And because that's like the most deepest thing, like, oh my God, I don't want regrets on my deathbed, or to be
Yeah.
alone or something. And what do people don't regret that they didn't work harder or that they didn't make more money. They regret that they weren't more authentic, that they weren't more
Oh,
vulnerable, that they didn't prioritize the time for the relationships that really mattered and the connections that really mattered to them. So, and particularly when I say that in front of an audience of like 50-year-old, like 50 to 60-year-old like couples, I did this last year back when I could do public speaking
Yeah.
in Boston. I think the men were probably like thinking, oh yeah, this is just romance and whatever. And then I was like, no, I don't think you guys get this. And like, you could have heard a pin drop in that audience
Wow.
because like, especially once you're over 50, like some of your friends start like dying suddenly
Yeah.
and people get cancer more so and don't live of it. And so that's what we're talking about here. This is the depth of what it means to be a human and deeply connect with others. And that's the shit that's most meaningful in life,
Wow.
especially when you reflect back at the end of life.
Oh, that is powerful. I think that is such a beautiful way to just wrap it up, tie a bow on it.
Yeah.
Jen, how can we find you?
Thank you for asking.
Yes.
My website is my main hub for everything. It's drjensden.com. Frankly, if you just go to Google or anywhere and type in any version of Dr. Jen's Den, it'll come up. But it's drjennsden.com.
Yep.
That's my main hub for stuff. My book is on there, From Madness to Mindfulness. My blog, I've got tons of YouTube videos. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. So most of my stuff, it's all linked from there. Most of it's Dr. Jen's Den. That's my handle on everything. But yeah, I also have a podcast called Sex Talk with Clinton, the doc, with a local radio host here in San Diego, where it's all sex, intimacy. And most recently, the past two of the recent episodes, I tried VR porn because I have an Oculus Quest 2 headset that I got for Christmas. And so I've tried VR porn. Holy shit. Oh my God.
What do you mean? Like, are you scarred? Are you like all about it?
Well, I'll just tell you a little bit. Well,
yeah.
Because I could only find stuff that was the point of view of a male. And so if you think down, anytime you look down at your body, your entire life, you look down, it's your body.
Uh-huh.
Well, in the VR headset, I look down and it's a dude's body.
Oh.
And then I look down and I've got like his chest and whatever in his underwear. And then some woman comes up and her breasts seem huge in VR for whatever reason, like right in front of me. And then she starts sucking on my dick. And I'm like, I have a dick. And I know it's not my dick because I don't have a dick, but it's like it's my dick. And it's so confusing. So anyway, I talk about that on some of the recent episodes.
I'm crying. That is so funny. Oh my God. Okay. So check out Jen's website. Check out Jen's podcast. I am seriously crying. That is so funny.
Thank you so much. These questions were like, I haven't thought in depth about some of these before, which was so great for me. And I just really appreciate the perspective you bring. And of course, I love always talking to you. It makes me happy.
I know. Honestly, it makes me so, so happy. Jen, thank you so much. We'll have to have you on again.
Awesome. I definitely will.